Hey guys, welcome back for some more tutorials. I'm your host Magnet, and today we're going to be talking about using Roach Hydra and ZvP. And I'm doing this mostly because it seems like a lot of people just make Roach and Hydra but don't really understand the way you're supposed to apply it in this matchup. So we're going to be talking a lot about how to apply more so aggression with it and be hitting the right timings and supporting with the right units. Also going to be touching on things like upgrades, getting the right amount of surface area, stuff like that. It's just going to be all you really need to know about using Roach Hydra in this matchup, and we're going to be watching some good players do that. So let's jump into the game here, and we're going to be watching Sue versus Trap. Sue is a extremely good Zerg, and in ZvP we've talked about it a lot. The whole idea is really just to get up to 3 bases as soon and as safely as possible, so you definitely do need to make sure that you are scouting and everything, and there are a lot of videos for stuff like that, so go back and look at those. If you need to get information on that, there is a link down in the description for you. So this is just assuming that you've already watched all that stuff and you know what to do as far as reacting against various different things. This isn't too much to worry about right now, as Sue just does block this pretty well, so nothing to really worry about. We'll talk about cannon rushes and stuff in another video, so look out for that. Cannon does start coming up here, but like I said, nothing really happens. So just getting his second base up here, he's going to want to take a third as soon as possible, so going to see Trap starting to preempt that just a little bit, but he does put it down. Back in Trap's base, not a whole lot going on as well, and we won't focus too much on the Protoss here. We're going to talk a little bit about theory, and as far as what the Protoss wants to do throughout the game, and why you need to be a little bit aggressive against these type of things. So he's just getting his extra gases here. He's going to put down his Roach Hydra just a little bit to hopefully defend against a lot of random timings and stuff. But Sue is one of those players that will just rely on Zergling speed and fast Hydralisks instead. So he's just going to go for that instead. He's just going to grab a faster lair. He'll eventually want to get Zergling speed, and Zergling's speed with Hydras is really strong at holding off a lot of the 2-base stuff that Protoss can bring out, so I'd really recommend starting out with something like that. But you can go for an earlier Roach Warren. It really just depends on what you're comfortable with, but you definitely do need either a Roach Warren or Zergling speed quick enough to hold off a lot of the earlier gateway timings, which we've again talked about in other videos, so not much of a reason to rehash that. So Hydralist Den's on the way, and this is when you need to start getting into more of a Roach Hydra aggressive type of composition, is when the Protoss takes their third base. So a Protoss that takes the third base really wants to get out things like Colossus, maybe a lot of Void Arrays, maybe they want to do some Blink Stalker timings, stuff like that. But if they're ever just being really economically greedy and trying to tech at the same time, that allows you a lot of opportunity to get a lot of Roaches and Hydras up in his face as soon as possible. And the faster you do it, the easier time you're going to have with dealing with Protoss' unit composition, because you're going to be constantly resetting it. Maybe you're resetting his Colossus count or his Void Array count over and over with constant aggression. That makes it really hard for Protoss to get off the ground, and that's kind of the idea behind Roach Hydra. Like I said, you can't just sit back in your base with Roach Hydra and just wait. You have to be pretty aggressive and proactive with it, otherwise the Protoss can get out of control. And I hear a lot of people saying stuff like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do against huge Protoss armies, like a lot of Colossus and Archons and Void Rays. And one of the really ultimate answers is don't let them get that far and punish them for trying to take a third base with so few units. With just, Hydra timings, Roach Hydra timings, whatever you can get put together. Just be aggressive, and you can assume it this way: if you're always ahead in economy and you're spending all your money, you should have more stuff than him, and you should be able to hit these timings pretty well and at least trade okay against these and prevent him from getting those crazy armies that you can't stop in the late game. So that's a big precursor to a lot of what we're going to see here. So Hydralist Den coming down right now. The first thing you typically want to research is Hydra range and then speed afterward, just to fire over force fields and stuff like that, so there's range on the way now. Oracle being a little bit annoying, we're not going to focus too much on that, as you should be able to hold this just fine with the Spore and some Queens. Back in Trap space, we can see just by watching the Protoss, he's going to start up Void Rays, and his idea is going to be with Colossus. So if they get up to 4 and 5 Colossus, that's going to be the point where your Roach Hydra is not going to do anything against it. That's why you need to be aggressive when they have maybe 1 or 2 Colossus. 1 or 2 Colossus is a lot easier to fight than 5 or 6. So that's why you need to get out and in their face. So Roach Warren's on the way now. Notice that the upgrades are starting, and upgrades with Roach Hydra is kind of implied. There's not much of a reason to not get upgrades because they scale so well with this type of composition. So I would honestly go for double evolution chamber. You'll notice the timings. He started his upgrades at about 9:30. If you can get both sets of upgrades going and just keep them going throughout the game, then at least you'll match the Protoss's upgrades throughout the game as well. And with the Carapace upgrades, in addition to the attack, if you keep taking good fights over and over, then you really should get good trades. But notice, like I said, this is going to be all about hitting the right timings with this composition and just attacking the Protoss consistently and effectively throughout the game. So Su is really just building up here, but he's not going to build up to a huge army, considering just sitting back here won't do anything for him. On the Protoss side, you can see on the production tab there are Void Rays and Colossus on the way, so he's starting to get into that really scary composition that not a lot of Zergs know how to deal with. You can see Hydra range, or rather Hydra speed is on the way, as well as Roach speed, and you don't really want to attack until both of those are done. Once those are both done, maybe you have +1 or maybe 1-1, that's going to be your central point for your first timing. And whenever people say something like quote-unquote timing, that means that all of your upgrades finish at a really nice time, and as right when your upgrades finish is going to be when they're at their strongest, because maybe the Protoss doesn't have Colossus range, maybe they don't have +2, maybe they don't have all this stuff, but if you wait too long, they probably will have it. So that's the whole idea behind hitting timings, is try to line up your upgrades to all finish at similar times, and once they finish, then you can go. So you can see there's a lot of Hydras out right now. He's going to start mixing in a lot of Roaches as well. You can see you want to basically even this out just a little bit. If you want more information on how to balance this better, you can watch the videos for unit compositions. So look out for that. But the Roach speed's about to finish, and that's going to trigger him going. So he's going to start heading across the map now. He's of course starting his next little, set of upgrades here. Just seeking out for random pylons and stuff. Now we're at the point where it's time to fight. And on the Protoss side, he has a ton of cannons here, and this is a really defensive play here from Trap. You might run against this in your own games as well, but the idea here is he knows that he's pretty vulnerable with all these Void Rays and Colossus, that he needs a way to keep these alive, and maybe trading out cannons to keep those alive is a good idea. And that's why you need to be able to kill this sooner rather than later, because if you let it get out of control, then you're in trouble. So he's just setting up here. One thing we were going to talk about is getting good surface area, so you want to spread out your units as much as possible here, so you're hitting in as wide of arc as possible. If you're all bunched up in one area, that makes it really easy for Colossus and Storms and stuff to kill you really fast. So we're just going to watch this come up here. There's not a lot of fancy micro that needs to be done with this type of composition. If you can get on top of the Colossus and kill Colossus, then that's great, but ultimately it's just about spreading out your units and getting in there as soon as possible. We can even see from Su's macro, and like we talked about in the macro video, we maxed out at a very similar time in the macro video, and it's all about, you know, hitting your injects, making drones, spending your money, and getting up in their face. The faster you can do this, the easier time you're going to have. So he's coming up here right now, just getting a great spread. You can see the Protoss unit composition is way spread back there. We're actually going to zoom out because it's such a large battle. But if you can get spreads like this, you can start moving up little groups of units to try and pick off Colossus. You can hopefully try and pick off these really expensive Void Rays. And if you're able to get good spreads like this, and if you hit these timings crisply, you can see you hit right when Roach speed finished up, then you're going to be in great shape here, as he's able to knock down a bunch of these Colossus. So it's going to be a recurring theme throughout this video, is that the quicker and crisper you attack, and the bigger armies obviously that you have from, you know, macroing and spending your money and hitting your injects and whatnot, and the easier time you're going to have. Look at the status of this now, and there's really not a whole lot Su has done other than just trying to pick off a couple Colossus here and there. He's totally broken down all these cannons. He's killed a lot of workers. He can easily kill this base. Trap is down to 1 Colossus, whereas before I think he was working on 3. So that's really, really good for Su. Now he knows that if he's forced the Colossus down to just 1 or 2, he can switch into something else if he wants to. Maybe he can switch into something like Ultras or something like different Hive Tech, or he can just keep making Roach Hydra and try to bludgeon him to death, which is a pretty common strategy. So watch this for a little bit longer. You can see it's going to end fairly soon, and we should know that it's going to end in Su's favor, considering he hit this timing really well. You can see Trap desperately trying to add more cannons here, and you want to keep the pressure on. Don't let him recover if you can help it. As long as you trade these units out reasonably well, maybe it's for workers, maybe it's for Colossus or whatnot, then that'll be great. If you kill the 3rd base, that's basically game over. You can just keep making Roach Hydra until they're dead. There's not a whole lot they can do if you kill the 3rd, and that's usually what these attacks are aimed at. So Su's in a fantastic position. He's up by a ton of supply, about 70 supply. Not much of a reason to keep watching this game. So we'll go ahead and watch another game. And the next game is going to be mostly about supporting it properly. But it's also going to be a little bit about still hitting those timings crisply. Because if like I said, if you just let them sit around and do whatever they want, then all of a sudden you have to deal with 5 or 6 Colossus rather than 2 or 3. So we're going to be watching Hyun. He's fighting Alicia. I'll hide the timeline here. Not that it's really all that important. But this game is going to be a lot about supporting properly with Vipers. Vipers are really good, especially against Colossus compositions, because you can pull the Colossus into your own army and kill it before they do too much damage. So that's the whole idea with supporting properly, is you want to kill their most important units, whether that's Void Rays, whether that's Colossus, it's whatever they're relying on to deal most of the damage to your army. So typically the support you're going to want to give for your Roach Hydra is something like Vipers. You can add Corruptors against Colossus, but that gets a little dangerous against Void Ray compositions, because if you lose your Corruptors, then that's kind of a waste. So usually people like Vipers instead. So this time on the Protoss side, he's just going to go for a quicker Twilight Council, maybe a Blink play or something like that. We've talked a lot about holding those off as well, so not a whole lot of reason to keep up on that. But these are all really going to be centered around the third base, and that's why you need something there to spot for when they take their third base. So he's just macroing up like he normally would want to, and like we talked about, that's also in the macro video, so not much of a reason to pay too much attention to that. You can see him rallying Zerglings forward just to maybe try and cancel the third base that comes down. But right now, he's been on 2 bases for quite a while. You can start making your Roaches or making your Hydras now. He's using Zergling speed as his main form of defense here, so we talked about that a lot as well. And he's just going to move out and take his third now. So once they've taken their third is the point where you can start thinking about attacking them. So he's lining up his upgrades so that +1's on the way. He has a Hydralisk Den coming down now. He's getting a second Evo Chamber like Su didn't do in the last game. Starts off with Hydra range, considering that's a lot more important than speed. And on the Protoss side, pretty predictably, he's going to be going into Colossus eventually. Right now he's just going to be relying on Force Fields and Blink to hold off a lot of these attacks. But just getting a good spread and fighting into that, that's the best you can really ask for from a Zerg perspective. So 1-1 on the way now for Hyun. And he should, I think, already have Roach speed. So let's double check that. And it looks like he doesn't. So he's eventually going to want to get that when he starts adding in Roaches. Notice he's really only on Hydraling right now. So that's going to be pretty good for the first little while. But you will want to add on those Roaches just to tank the damage a little bit better against things like Colossus. So Hydra speed on the way, 1-1 on the way. If he were to line this up properly, he'd need a lot faster Roach Warren so that he could line up Roach speed with everything else. But still, you do want to be aggressive even if these don't line up perfectly. It's better to be aggressive than to just wait. So he is getting everything put together. He's starting to get an Infestation Pit as well. Infestation Pit is just to get him up into Hive so he can start using Vipers, which is what we talked about in this game. So Hyun isn't being quite as aggressive as Su. He kind of just let Alicia have that third base, which is a little more dangerous. But his trade-off is going to be, instead, I'm going to go for Vipers, and I'll deal with the Colossus by not being super aggressive against them, but rather pulling them into my army so you can't do a whole lot. Let's notice the timings once again. Hyun's about to be maxed out, and it's about 1330, like we talked about in the macro video. It's a really good benchmark if you can hit that. But he's opting for not as much aggression here, which, I mean, you probably won't be able to hit the same aggression timings that the pros do, but you will want to bear in mind that you do need to get on top of them as soon as possible. And in this game, if you can trade out some sentries and stuff rather than Colossus, considering there really aren't many Colossus on the field right now, then you'll be in good shape as well. So just get out there and be willing to trade out your army. So Hyun, like we talked about, he's spreading out his army quite a bit. He's going to get some on the high ground, some on the low ground. He's going to attack from pretty much all sides here. You want to try and micro your way out of force fields the best you can by just kind of walking them around a little bit. But even if they have to burn a lot of force fields, that means their army isn't strong enough to kill yours in a straight up fight anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. So I wouldn't worry too much about that right now. So you can see if you can get Colossus here, then that'll be great. He really just wants to trade out supply here the best he can, because he's going to be making Roach Hydra for a long time. And if he can trade it out for things like sentries, maybe he can pick off a Colossus here with this flank. Maybe you can kill some workers over here on the other side. Whatever you can trade out is going to be worthwhile. So it looks like Hyun's attacks failed, but considering he can resupply in Hydra so fast, he's going to have 2-2 here pretty soon, so his Roach Hydra is going to be getting stronger and stronger. As long as you don't die to any counterattacks right here, then the trades are fine. So as he killed the Colossus, that's the biggest part. We're going to start seeing the Vipers getting mixed in just a little bit more here, so I'm going to fast forward up until that point. So right now just kind of sneaking around, and Alicia thinks that the Vipers might be on the way, so they might try and counter you with Templar. So it's important of you to be a little bit careful with these Vipers, maybe bring them in just a tad late so that they don't get fed back right away. just keep that on your mind, that Protoss will want to usually counter these Vipers with Templar. Once the Vipers come out, you definitely do need to make sure that you do get the energy for them. So what some players do is they will put out extra Evo chambers to let their Vipers suck up energy. And if you accidentally suck up too much and you kill a building with that, at least it's a useless Evo chamber and it's not something important like a hatchery. So you want to make sure you keep an eye on that, but you do need energy on these Vipers to be able to do those pulls. And you want those as soon as possible, because the whole idea with Roach Hydra is you want to be really aggressive against a Protoss that wants to just sit back and get a lot of Colossus or some type of important unit. So right now there's a couple Colossus, there's a third one on the way. There's going to be Templar out and Storm out here pretty soon. But if you can pull the Colossus and important units into your army and kill them off right away, then they're going to have a really hard time trading well against that, considering your upgrades should be a lot better. And overall, the Protoss units are pretty bad outside of the most important ones, which is Colossus, maybe Templar, Void Ray, stuff like that. So here we go. I'm going to start attacking forward here. With these Vipers, you can also drop Blinding Clouds just to mess up the micro a little bit. But I'd say more importantly, you need to get rid of these Colossus as soon as possible. So pulling these in is really your biggest need. You can see the abducts are already queued on these Colossus, so you can pull them in. And once you get the pulls on there, usually your army will just target them right away, but you can just grab small groups and attack the Colossus. Sometimes that micro can mess up the battle a little bit though, so I wouldn't be too hasty about doing that. So we'll just continue to watch here. See, the Vipers do pull everything in. He's trying to target down the Colossus the best he can. And if you can kill the Colossus right away, then the rest of the army will survive and deal a lot of damage. So, see, he kills 2 Colossus. He's still trading out reasonably well. Because he's able to keep up on everything else that's going on with the upgrades and with the macro, he has a huge bank here, so he can resupply really fast. A little bit of a counterattack here from Alicia, getting pretty annoying for Hyun. But he's reset the Colossus count back down to 1. He's going to make more Vipers here, he's going to make more Roach Hydra, and he's just going to continue to do this over and over, considering that's going to be his solution to Colossus throughout the game. So we're going to kind of fast forward just a little bit here. We're just demonstrating that just because you lost one fight, or you didn't, more specifically, you didn't win one fight, doesn't mean the game is over. You need to continue to be aggressive and not just let him sit around and do whatever he wants. So 3-3s on the way for Hyun right now. Notice he's also getting Tunneling Claws here, which is a good answer to a lot of force fields. So you can use that as well, but this is kind of late. A little bit of a weird choice here. And again, the Vipers, they have energy as they have consumed enough to get that. You just really want to pull in the Colossus here, and like I said, maybe you can use some abducts. Notice that the Vipers are always coming in a little bit late, and that's because you don't want to get fed back right away, because if you get fed back, that kind of nullifies the usefulness of these Vipers. So another option here is that if you're getting fed back too much, you can just use Blinding Clouds and go for a little bit more of an overall type of strategy here. Considering the Blinding Cloud casting range is pretty long, it's at least better than the abducts, because the abducts have to go all the way to the back of the Protoss army in order to get those Colossus. So we're going to see that come up here. He does spend the Storms here. He does get 2 pulls on there, even though he did get fed back once. And as long as you're able to kill these Colossus right away, now look at the battle. It's only Stalkers, which are really bad damage output against 3-3 Hydras. These are about to be 3-3, they're 3-2 right now. But 3 upgraded Hydras will just plow through this army really fast once the Colossus are dead. And that's the whole idea here, is just killing the most important units with your support and pushing them back. So you can see Hyun absolutely won that fight convincingly. And we can even see by the game timer that there's not a whole lot left here, and it's really just Hyun reinforcing over and over with his Roach Hydra and being super aggressive and eventually knocking this down. So we continue to watch here. You can see that sometimes, I mean, it may have seemed like he lost that battle because he got pushed away, but you need to be on top of your reinforcements, you need to be on top of staying aggressive and on top of them throughout the game. That's so redundant, it makes my head hurt, but either way. Dealing with a little bit of harass here is Hyun, but even still, the aggression from the Roach Hydra is doing really, really well. And if you can break them down, like I said, to just Stalkers or something like that, killing off Stalkers is much easier than killing off a bunch of Colossus. A weird burrow there from Hyun, but he's getting more Vipers here, and he's going to eventually push in once again. If he keeps doing this over and over and killing the important units, then he'll eventually win this game. So, going to see this come up here just a little bit. There is one more video with the Roach Hydra composition that I want to show you guys pretty quickly. I know this video is getting a tad long, but we'll see that in just a minute. You can see him throwing down the Blinding Clouds here, which will mess up the micro a little bit of his army. But ultimately, pulling in the Colossus is the most important thing, and he does still have energy for that, so he should pull one in here in just a bit. Notice how he's microing away from these Templar the best he can, so you really don't want to lose your Viper to Templar. And as he pulls the Colossus on top of the army, they die really fast. And look at Hyun's supply now, it's about 60 supply ahead. He can continue to mess up the micro here with more blinding clouds if he needs to. But just staying aggressive and supporting properly is really what got him into this position in the first place. More blinding clouds just to continue to mess up the micro of these units. You can see all these units underneath there, just like derp, 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 they don't know what to do. So, he's in good shape here. This game's going to end pretty soon. There's not a whole lot of a reason to keep watching this, considering he just refills on Roach Hydra and attacks again. So, move on to the final replay of this video. Hopefully we can just kind of breeze through it, considering this video is getting a little bit long and there's not a whole lot more we need to know about this composition, but one last game, we'll take a look at it. This is going to be Maxed versus Tudming. Tudming, of course, the Zerg. Both these guys are actually Chinese players, and Starcraft's getting pretty big in China, so good on them. So, we're going to see, of course, watching Tudming's perspective here, not the Protoss. And like I said, there's not a whole lot to talk about in these openers here, so we're going to fast forward on ×8 just to get to the stage of the game we want to see. Pool coming up here, going to be a hatchery here pretty soon as it gets blocked, but either way it just takes a different base. So everything's coming out. Continuing to add on drones here. I wish we could go faster, but we can't. Back in the Protoss base, pretty normal stuff coming down. Forge expand, nothing too unusual. Most of these attacks are going to be centered around when they take their third, so that's what we're going to watch out for here. Zerg continuing to add on drones. He's adding on his gas. He's going to want to eventually get a Roach Warren or Zergling speed here pretty soon, or he can get a fast lair, which is what he's doing. So he goes ahead and grabs that. See, DTs are on the way, so you do need to be on top of your scouting to know that you do need to put up some maybe overseers, maybe some spore crawlers, stuff like that, just to protect against that. So sacrificing an overlord is always a good idea. Just be sure you know what's going on, but this is a little tricky as he does have the proxy Dark Shrine. So in this game, he does have his Roach Warren coming up, speed's about to finish, and he needs to be sure he doesn't take too much damage from these DTs. But I'm showing this to you because this is the ultimate example that if you're able to stay aggressive against a play like this, then you will dominate it, considering if they don't do anything with their DTs, they're going to have wasted a lot of money, and they won't have enough to defend your attacks, assuming you stay on top of them. So this is the perfect example of Protoss trying to do something, and if it fails, especially something silly like this, then your aggression will be unmatched. There's no way they can hold it, and it's on you to stay aggressive throughout the game. So the DTs are coming up right now. Pro players are good enough to notice these shimmers, so he should see this come up and start to realize what's going on. But he should have already had a Overseer done, maybe a Spore Crawler done. That's why you really want to stay on top of your scouting. He's probably going to lose this hatchery, but even if he loses it, this is the type of deal where, again, DTs are so expensive and they transition so poorly that if you just keep up on your Roach Hydras and you hit the right timings, they just won't have units back at home to deal with that. I mean, he just lost about 400 gas worth of units to kill a hatchery. And if you can rebuild that right away and not take too much extra damage from it and just get on top of it, they should be fine. So this game is just an example of, even though it looks bad, stay aggressive and stay on top of them and you should be in good shape. Notice his drone count's a little bit low, so you will want to refill your drones, but just get on him as soon as you can. Notice the supplies right now. He's still 30 supply ahead despite taking a lot of damage there. So you can continue to start to trade here with these first couple of units. You might get some stuff done with these earlier attacks, and we'll talk about these in a different video, how to set up these type of attacks and know when to use them. But this time, his support is going to be this Roach Burrow. We saw that a little bit in the last game, but the Roach Burrow is going to be a big important factor. By the way, he does kill the Nexus here, so this is really annoying for Maxed, getting reset on his third base here, despite doing pretty well with his opener. So being aggressive here, like I said, especially against DT openers, is really important. But the Roach Burrow is going to be a really cool addition to this. He's starting up his Hydraless Den. Again, you want to start out with range more often than not, so range coming up now. Burrow, of course, is what you also need to make these Tunneling Claws worth it. So Burrow and Roach Tunneling Claws is going to be a good idea. And the idea behind this is that a lot of Protosses will try to protect their third bases with force fields. And if you can just burrow underneath the force fields, then it makes them useless. And if you can make the force fields useless, then they spend all this gas doing nothing. So that's kind of the idea behind the earlier Roach Burrow stuff. And I really love to see stuff like this. And I'm kind of sad that it doesn't come out more often because it's always really cool and really fun to watch. And it usually wins, so I don't know why it doesn't come out very often. So the Protoss back at home, he's relying on a lot of force fields right now. His composition is going to be a lot about Void Rays. You can see the Void Rays coming out. So you will want to try and pull your units around just to try and deal with stuff like that. Maybe he's going to lose a hatchery, but still the aggression is more important. And the force fields start to come up right now. And if he does get force fielded, he can just burrow underneath those and just be like, what's up? His force field shouldn't do much. He's not really showing that quite yet, because I don't think that Maxed knows about the burrow yet. So it's just a little bit of mind games going on right now, nothing too crazy. Of course, if you're going against DTs, you will want to bring Overseers with your army. So once again, it looks like he got pushed back, but because he's able to maintain the aggression here and try to make Protoss mess up is going to be the reason that he eventually wins this game. You can see this goes on for another few minutes, but we'll continue to watch. Colossus are the new thing to start adding in now for Maxed, just to try and defend against these types of timings. And we can see him starting to bunch up here just a little bit. He still is going to be using a lot of force fields here, and there's going to eventually be a point where the force fields really don't matter because he can just burrow right around them. So again, Tudming just being super aggressive here. Notice he's not max, but he still needs to keep the pressure on. Just continuing to apply pressure here once again, trying to get as good trades as possible. And in this case, look at the Protoss army. The Protoss army is tiny. There's not a whole lot that they can do against this if you're able to keep their army small throughout the game. So keeping the Protoss army small again is a big thing behind this, and you can get great trades if that's the case. Of course, he is using these force fields just to try and hold the rest of the Zerg army back, so you don't want to butt up against him too much. You can't just fall back. A lot of Hydras and Lings are on the field right now, so not a ton of Roaches, but I promise the Roach Burrows will continue to play. See him just trying to keep him down there as long as possible. He doesn't want to overextend into these cannons and overcharge Nexus quite yet. Going to start attacking here just a little bit, and again, just staying aggressive is the whole motto behind the Roach Hydra composition. So we're going to continue to see this come down just a little bit. Maxed eventually needs to come out. So notice the surface area right now. The surface area is in a nice big arc so that all these units can be firing on the Protoss units while the Protoss can't fire back as fast. So big arcs are important. And continuing to see him whittle this down just a little bit. He's now out of force fields once again, and once you get on top of the Void Rays and Colossus, you can start killing the expensive units. You can even start pulling these forward just to kill the Colossus to the best you possibly can. So all this going really well here for Tudming, and it's only because of the aggression. And Max is just barely holding on to this third base here, having a really hard time. I was sure that force fields eventually became, or rather Roach Burrow eventually became a thing in this, but maybe I'm wrong. I guess we'll see if that comes up. So more Hydras are continuing to come up here. Like I said, you eventually will want to support with something other than Hydras, because they'll eventually start to get melted by the Colossus just a little bit, but if you're able to control this right, you can get still decent trades. But you can see, there's a lot of Hydras out there, and the Colossus are holding them off. So Maxed is just going to be like, geez, I need to rebuild this base because I need to hold this off the best I can. And now Tudming is thinking, well, now that I have my Colossus out, maybe I can start supporting them with sentries and stuff like that, and just keep this army back so the Colossus can outrange everything. And I was sure that eventually there came a point where this came into play, so we'll have to see, but yeah, I promise it eventually happens. This video awkwardly winding down like it happens every once in a while, but there are a lot of Roaches and stuff on the field now, and again, continuing to be aggressive is the whole reason why he's able to keep this Protoss composition down to something manageable. Now there's 3 Colossus out, and notice the big spread on his units here. There's stuff down here, there's stuff all the way up here, so that he can get a full surround on the Protoss army once that comes down to it. So pushing in now, needs to wait for the rest of his army to come together. And look at this, all these force fields will keep all this army back, and the Colossus will fry this up. This is where the Roach Burrow comes into play. So he's just like, you know what, force fields, they don't matter. I'm going to go right around them, I'm going to unburrow right on top of your Colossus, and guess what? Now your Colossus are dead, now the rest of your army can't deal with the rest of mine, and that's going to push you out of this game. So, cool games there out of all these Zergs, so I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'll always be back for more, so look out for that in the very near future. So, if you haven't already, please subscribe. It does help me out a lot, and of course it keeps you updated on what I'm doing. So, yeah, I'll see you guys back for more videos very soon. Take care.